Before we continue our story of vertebrates, I thought we could use a little bit of a recap. So, all chordates have 4 shared derived characteristics, at least at some point in their lives, as you can see in this lancelet. One lineage of chordates branched off from the Chordata and the Chordata. These animals had backbones and teeth, but no jaws to put them in. And at this point, the backbone was still just made out of cartilage. This is your Agnatha, for example, this lamprey here. Later on, a new lineage diverged, a lineage that had backbones and teeth, as well as a new characteristic, jaws. This is the Chondrichthyes. Not too much longer after that, well, in the grand scheme of things, the teeth that were found in jaws, this boniness spread throughout the body and replaced that cartilaginous skeleton with bones all over. Later still, amphibians came along, which could live on land as adults, thanks to having 4 limbs in order to walk on the land. But they were still dependent on water for the larval stages. So, the next big leap forward in the evolution of vertebrates was the ability to live on land. Not just live on land, but also to reproduce on land. How did they do it? The main synapomorphy of land-dwelling vertebrates was the advent of an amniote egg. An egg that had a membrane called an amnion that was capable of maintaining a stable liquid environment for the developing embryo. So, what are we looking at in this amniote egg? We can see that the embryo, the developing fetus, is inside this one sac, outlined in green here, called the amnion. And the main function of the amnion is to make sure that the embryo is protected and that fluid that's bathing it maintains relatively stable conditions of temperature and osmotic conditions as well. So there's no osmotic stress. Another membrane found in the amniote egg is the allantois. The allantois stores metabolic wastes from the developing embryo, and it's also a site of gas exchange. Also inside this membrane here that I'll get to in a second is the yolk sac. The yolk sac contains nutrients that will be used to fuel and provide biomass for the embryo. And surrounding the amnion, the allantois, and the yolk sac is this other membrane layer called the chorion. So the chorion contains those 3 membranes. Outside the chorion is the albumin. Also, the white of an egg is made up of a protein called albumin that is fairly easily broken down to provide amino acids for protein in the developing fetus. And surrounding all of that is a shell. And the shell of reptiles is relatively leathery compared to the shell of bird eggs. And then mammals have taken this amniote egg and it's gone in a very, very different direction. But we'll talk more about that later on. Also, living on land meant having to have skin that could resist drying out. And keratin turned out to be a very useful protein for that. Also, amniotes have lungs, which are much, much better at breathing air than skin is good at breathing air. It's better at breathing through water. All right, so reptilians are much better adapted for land than amphibians. They have dry, scaly skin, they have their lungs, and they have these eggs that they can lay on land and not worry about them drying out. We've got 5 orders of reptilians to discuss: the Testudines, turtles and tortoises; Squamata, which are lizards and snakes; Sphenodonta, which are the tuataras, probably something that you may have seen in a zoo, maybe not seen ever; the crocodilians; and then aves. So Testudines includes turtles and tortoises. Testudines are strange animals that have part of their skeleton, namely their backbone, ribs, and sternum, all fused to form a shell. So the carapace that is on top is actually derived from part of the spine and the ribs, and the plastron that is on the bottom underneath there is made from the sternum and also part of the ribs. Turtles don't have teeth. They also don't hear very well. They're not very, they don't use sound as a major form of communication. But they can live to be very long, over 100 years old even. The order Squamata includes snakes and lizards and this very talented chameleon. Locally, we have lizards such as this green anole. Iguanas are also in the Squamata. And then every kind of snake that you can imagine is also in this order Squamata, like this garter snake, rattlesnakes, all the snakes. Now, you might think that snakes and lizards are pretty much the same thing, except that snakes don't have legs and lizards do, but there are some important morphological differences in addition to the lack of legs. The order Sphenodonta includes only 3 species. These 3 species are all called tuatara, and they are found only in New Zealand. Young tuatara have a remnant third eye called a pituitary eye or a pineal eye that disappears as they mature. So unless you've been to a zoo with a very healthy reptile collection, or you've been to New Zealand, you've probably never seen one of these guys before. But their name, tuatara, comes from the Maori word meaning peaks on their back. You may have seen this or something like it before. It's not that difficult to tell crocodiles and alligators apart. One will see you later, the other will see you in a while. All crocodilians have a 4-chambered heart, which efficiently separates the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood. That should sound familiar because that's what we have, a 4-chambered heart. They also, unlike other reptilians, they don't shed their epidermal scales. And some of them are warm-blooded. They are very efficient predators, but they're also very good mothers. So can you tell which one is an alligator and which one is a crocodile? Well, how do you tell the difference? Alligators tend to have more rounded noses or a more rounded rostrum. Also, the occlusion of the jaws, or the way the jaws fit together. The alligator's top jaw tends to fit down over the bottom jaw, and for this reason they say that you're not as likely to see any upward pointing teeth with their mouth closed, which you will see in the crocodile because their jaws meet much more evenly, so you're likely to see upward and downward facing teeth. So, have you figured it out? Yep, this one will see you later. This one will see you in a while. And this one will say, hey man, because it's not a crocodile or an alligator, it's actually a caiman. So, birds are considered to be reptiles by some taxonomists. Birds have keratinized structures sticking out of their skin, that most people just call feathers. So feathers may have originally adapted for insulation, but now they're an absolute necessity for the birds to do the thing that they do so well, which is to fly. Bird eggs have the same membranes and compartments as reptilian eggs, the amnion, the allantois, and the yolk sac within the chorion. But, like I said, the eggs of birds tend to have a calcareous shell rather than a leathery shell. Birds can range greatly in size. The tallest, largest bird is the African ostrich, which can be almost 3 meters tall, close to 9 feet. And the smallest bird is this little bee hummingbird you see on the right here, which is only 3 grams. Tiny little bird. So modern birds have a beak or a bill and no teeth. Their forelimbs are well adapted for flight, except in this guy here who uses his wings for flippers to help him swim underwater. Birds have a 4-chambered heart and a very efficient respiratory and circulatory system. They are the only animals, besides mammals, that can uniformly control their body temperature from within. They are endothermic and usually homeothermic as well. So, why do cladists consider birds to be reptiles? Because of a growing body of fossil and DNA evidence that link birds to other reptiles via the dinosaurs. Another reptilian-like characteristic is if you look at the legs of birds, they still have scaly skin. So here is a cladogram, now slightly out of date, showing the birds as being part of all of the other dinosaurs. So things like the sauropods, stegosaurs, ankylosaurs, ceratopsian, and then all your T-Rex and your raptorial dinosaurs over here in the theropoda. So we hear less and less about how dinosaurs are extinct, and you might hear that it's the non-avian dinosaurs that are now extincto. So why should we consider that maybe birds aren't reptiles? Because their morphology is so very different from other reptile groups. Things that we traditionally think of as reptiles. They don't have those reptilian characteristics like having scaly skin and leathery eggs. They have feathers, which is unlike any other reptile group. They also have these pneumatized bones, bones that have air cavities inside them, which enable them to reduce their weight, which helps with flight. And they also have lost their urinary bladder. So that also helps to save on weight, enabling them to fly. So if you ever wonder why when a bird poops on you, it's so liquidy and runny, it's because they don't really pee. They kind of mix the pee and the poo metabolic waste together into the white and green stuff that they deposit. So that's it for birds. And you may be wondering, well, how do mammals fit into all of this? The fossil evidence suggests that the early ancestors of mammals diverged from all other reptiles fairly soon after the advent of amniote eggs. So a key line of evidence for this comes from looking at skulls, in particular the holes in skulls, or what we call fenestrae, which are like windows. So in turtles and testudines, they have no additional openings in their skull behind the eye orbit, so they're called anapsids. Our ancestors and we only have one opening, one fenestra behind the eye orbit, so we are synapsids. And all other reptiles, including birds, have 2 openings behind the eye orbit. And these are called diapsids. So, without taking a much lengthier diversion into the study of paleontology, we will now proceed into the last class of the semester, the extant synapsids, also known as the mammals.